Why, hello there. Has it been, a week, 2 weeks already? It's great to be back here with my good buddy Phil to discuss the wonder that is Manchester United, especially when we're after winning a game of football, my man. How's everything with you?
All good, mate. All good. You've had a rough 2 weeks. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Part and parcel of life, unfortunately, but the man got a good send off and he'll be remembered fondly, so that's the main thing.
Yes.
And you know, it's a good example, Phil, because football for so many people can mean so many different things. It can provide that form of escapism for individuals when they need something to think about outside of the harsh realities of life. And even though
Mm-hmm.
Manchester United can give you plenty of stuff to be crying about every particular day, it's always a good thing, as I said, to enter into any sort of a conversation about the football club off the back of a win. And that was, let's call a spade, anything but a straightforward performance and victory against Everton. I know you had a conversation with James yesterday. I've obviously had my own podcast, but we haven't spoken about this together. So it's only best just to wrap our heads around it and see when we come together. Benjamin Sesko again coming off the bench to provide an invaluable goal, 3 points, which I think the main thing to take from it before you digest the performance is the fact that we have a 3 point lead on Chelsea and Liverpool. We've got an 8 point lead on Brentford in seventh place, and we're closing the gap on Aston Villa. But if you're looking at the performance
Mhm.
first, what was your defining thoughts about it?
Well, a couple of things there. You're absolutely right about Manchester United football being a distraction from the vicissitudes of life. I was actually thinking about this after the Everton game, going, a lot of things in life are shit. A
Mm,
lot of people are struggling mentally. Football is supposed to be, as Matt Busby said, this is people work hard all week. They've stress pressures. This is supposed to be the one thing that they get to be entertained and distracted from. And we haven't had that for a long, long time with United. I mean, you're looking back at maybe Ten Hag's first season. The last time you saw Manchester United with, they're unbeaten in 10, where you felt there was actually an entertaining football team that you wanted to watch every week. So it's great to have that because we haven't had that in recent era. But yeah, look, the result against Everton, I think that James and I were talking about this yesterday about the fact that there's no one really battering anyone anymore.
no.
I mean, I think 4-1 is the biggest win in the Premier League this season. So a 1-0 away win at Everton is as good as what anyone in the league is going to get, in my opinion. Thereabouts. You're not going to see too much of a differential between that. Lots of positives with new players in the team that have come in and made such an important contribution where you now have a trust. I think that Michael Carrick has enough body of work now to say, all right, he should be evaluated based on this, done an exceptional job. Not a new manager bench. A lot to be very positive about. And yeah, I think it feels good to be a Manchester United fan. And instead of looking beneath us in the league to be worried about who's catching us, we're now looking above. And that is a
Absolutely.
very, very relatively new and enjoyable experience.
It's been a very long time since we've been able to say that sort of stuff. But it was something I gestured. I was speaking yesterday to somebody, or I was addressing it on the podcast, that there was a question came through about could we possibly replicate what we saw 30 years ago with Fergie, Cantona, Keegan, and could we pull
We've
back?
all thought this, even though it's a guilty private thought. We're like, how many actually?
But how fantastic is it to be able to joke about those sort of things, and there's so much that goes askew with this football club on a daily basis, let alone a weekly basis, over a decade or more. To come away from Everton, a first game against them at the Hill Dickinson Stadium, and under
By the way,
floodlights.
worst named stadium in the league.
Pardon?
The worst named stadium in the league, by the way.
Oh God! Oh God! I mean, the stadium itself is fantastic, though, and
Yeah,
it's
beautiful
what
stadium.
it's what you'd expect with the new facilities. But I want to look at the actual game, and I want to talk about the game because I still haven't got over it. You've gone and you've invested as a football club into developing a 52,000 seater stadium. And you've got a veteran man in David Moyes there. And before I finish here, just allow me to say, it is not his prerogative to play any way of football, any style of football to appease his opposition. He is, it's his goal. to set out difficulty, to be able to gain points in whatever way they can. I just can't help but shape when you've put together a 52,000 seater stadium, you're packed, partisan audience, absolutely ripping the place apart. And you think it's okay to go out and set out in that style of football and that brand. See, so many people forgot when I was speaking to them, this wasn't an Everton that are fighting relegation. This was an Everton that if the result went the right way for them on the night, they could have finished above Brentford in 7th place in the league. That's leading towards European aspirations. And then you're looking at 25, 30 minutes of the game played. Everton have about 25% possession. There's no forward intent. There's no desire to win the game. And at the end of the first half, the only thing that they have to show for it is a Jimmy Garner free kick from about 30 yards that Lamans is able to deal with very, very easily. That said, I don't think it was all plain sailing, and I don't think that was the sum cause for Manchester United playing the way that they did, Phil. I think that we need to look at the performance as a whole. And while it is great to get that result and get 3 points and come away from a difficult evening, it was back-to-back games after West Ham where there's a lot of questions being asked about this side.
I was looking, while you were talking, I was just Googling the Premier League table to see how far Everton were away from the bottom three. Everton are 12 points away from the bottom three, with almost a similar distance between what United are and Arsenal on the top.
They could have been 15, though.
Yeah, when you look at Spurs, Shaun, right? You had this beautiful new stadium. It doesn't feel like home yet. Everton have lost more at home than they've won by a narrow margin. To be fair, I can sort of understand pragmatism from Moyes saying, look, let's just make sure that we get enough points on the board to where we're not sucked into something where it can go all wrong and you have craft beers in the championship. You know, let's make sure we stay up. And you're correct. It's not their job to play a particular way. This annoyed me when Arne Slot said this about teams coming to Liverpool and he wasn't happy with the way they played. I'm sorry, what? So what I agree with you on completely, and I think the Premier League need to do something about this, and I don't know how you go about it, is I think, one, there should be a linesman who should be allowed to go behind the goal on a corner, right? Who is able to see everything from that perspective, because there's just so much jostling, so much. How do you decide on what's a free kick, what's a penalty? I mean, it's just totally arbitrary. It's not pretty. It almost feels like a bit of a cheat code where you just smother the goalkeeper. And I have to be honest, I was really nervous with every one of those corners because you were just expect. It's really hard to prepare for that in the training ground because it's just there's really very little skill to it. And I'm not knocking the simplicity because I respect there's beauty in simplicity. But yeah, I mean, Everton didn't create anything from open play. It didn't look like they were going to create anything from open play. But I think in the same token, you have to give United credit for that because you take a look at the Everton at home, Shaun, which to me was a nadir for Amorim, in my opinion. Probably should have been the final straw whenever Everton go down to 10 men. And he's still playing 3 at the back. Carrick made substitutions to be attacking, to go after the game, got rewarded as he usually does. And I think that you have to give United some credit for shutting that game down in normal time. And also, injury time is now a friend to United, not a threat. Even though Everton got 5 minutes, I felt United are just as likely to get a second here as it was for Everton to get an equaliser.
Yeah, and Sesko on another day very well could have got a second, when he had that opportunity when they hit them on the break. A huge part of the game, and I think a lot of people will skate past this. Lisandro Martinez's absence and his ability to act as that quarterback and to marshal what you're seeing, it's something I've been speaking about since the team sheet was announced. Since obviously word broke prior to that as well that he was after picking up the calf injury. People don't realize, Phil, just how important he is. It's not about people focus so much on his size and his height, and then they start fixating on what he can and can't do as a defender against a 6'4" monster. People don't realize just how important that he is on the ball. And, one of his greatest assets I say this all the time, is that scoping over the top ball to Brian Mbeumo that he delivers on a regular basis. And I tell you, we could have done with that in spades against Everton, because you ended up getting in this cat and mouse kind of thing with them, where one team attacked, 11 men went behind the ball, the other team attacked, 11 men went behind the ball. So as Everton were pushing forward, if you had Leach there to deliver that ball over the top for Brian Mbeumo, I think you're talking about a totally different game.
I think if you remember last season, when we really first started to see that, we saw it away against City. Remember, it was ball over the top for Ahmad over the keeper. I saw his goal against Liverpool at Anfield. I think in many ways against teams that will come out against you and not play a low block, he is such an effective player playing from deep, because it's hard to break down the low blocks we saw against West Ham when you put these players behind the ball. So there's just no space. And you need a bit of individual magic, as you ended up getting that game with Sesko. But you look at 2 nights ago, you know, the counter-attack comes from a sensational ball from Cunha out wide that creates the goal. United finally catch Everton, pushing men forward, caught them on the break and scored. Martinez in that position, you know, his composure, his pass selection, also how he defends. I mean, he is just such. You think about the injuries this guy's had. You know, ACL injuries. You know, he'd broken metatarsals, multiple surgeries. You think about what United have lost with them. He's just such an important player. Plus, I think he, along with Cunha and everyone else, embodies a certain attitude, a certain energy, a certain fight, a certain competitiveness that you want in your team. He is just such an important player. I should be back for Palace, but yeah, I was really disappointed to read right before the game that he was out. But again, you know, one of the things that this current version of United is really, really encouraging, Shaun, is that there's so many alternatives if someone doesn't play well. If Mbeumo doesn't have a good couple of games, you almost don't notice because someone else is stepping up. Ahmad hasn't scored since City. Has had a bit of an indifferent few weeks. But if in any other version of United, Ahmad is getting battered because United are not scoring goals. Sesko was at 6 and 7 now scored. Most of them are subs. I mean, just incredible. So, yeah, I mean, I think that one of the great things about this current United team is that there's just so many positive alternative ways to win a football game that we never had before. The most shots of any team in the Premier League. In fact, the only teams to rival United's shots on goal this season is Real Madrid and Bayern Munich.
Now, I am a nerd for statistics, and I didn't know that. So you're after giving me one to work with there. That's fantastic.
I've been known to tell lies too. That's
well, you see, it's having options, and it's not having all of the weight of responsibility on one player's shoulders. That's the main thing. And I wrote about this recently. I specifically targeted Ahmad and how too many people are focusing on the lack of output, because he's instrumental in maybe the second to last ball, in the penultimate ball before the assist.
Yeah.
And the amount of progressive carries that he makes to lead transitions and to alleviate pressure from defense to attack, that's absolutely vital. And so many people just choose to ignore that because they look at the goals and assist column and they think, what is he actually doing? When realistically, if you look at his heat map, you can see that he's doing everything. He doesn't stop moving up that flank, whether it's in defense or whether it's in attack. And I think he's brilliant. But you've hit the nail on the head. There's multiple options. There's multiple avenues. It's not just give the ball to Bruno Fernandes and let's see if something can happen. We have so many different ways. And, you know, this is one of the main things to take from that goal. Bruno was not involved in it. You know, it began when it came out of the box. Sesko taps it down. It ends up with Cunha, 70-yard pass. Mbeumo squares it. Sesko, goal. And that epitomizes transitional counter-attacking football that Manchester United are synonymous with for so long. And look, we're referencing Sesko. We may as well stay with him. You know, you mentioned the 6 goals in 7 games. If you're looking at the league totally, what is it, 5 goals in 6 appearances? He's had his last 5 appearances off the bench. I think he's averaging in the league a goal every 36 or 37 minutes played. That's absolutely phenomenal. And while I could speak now about, do you think he deserves a start? Because I think everybody thinks, look, he's probably earned maybe a little bit of a starting berth, because if he's not going to be warranted with that, then what is the point in applying yourself in training? And what is the point in actually putting it in the field? But someone put something interesting to me earlier on, and it was on one of the Facebook groups. And it was drawing back on Rasmus Højlund and showing the benefits of what Sesko was getting that Højlund did not get. And it is very, very valid. It's not drawing back on what has been and gone, but it's looking at a young striker at the football club who's not been forced to play 90 minutes every single week, who's
Mhm.
not forced to be the primary outlet in goal scoring. And that leads into what you were saying with having Cunha and Bumo, those guys to be able to take the weight off his
Yeah.
shoulders. And I personally think, as a 22-year-old striker, we're seeing the best of him that we can possibly get when he's transitioning from a lesser league in the Bundesliga to the Premier League because of the people that he's surrounded with. And Højlund did not have that.
I would completely agree with that. I think that
Mm.
that is a very, very important point because, I just made it earlier. If you don't have that variety of goals in your team, that alternative goal threat, I mean, United haven't had that even in Ten Hag's first season. It was Marcus Rashford. Outside of that, there was no other real significant, consistent goal threat. Now they have that. I was reading a couple of stats on CSGO, just pulling up as you were talking. This is quite incredible. Under Amorim, 17 appearances. Since Amorim, 7 minutes played under Amorim, 1,040 minutes since Amorim, 273 goals under Amorim, 6 since Amorim. Minutes per goal, 520 under Amorim, 45.5 since Carrick. Shot conversion rate 5.6% under Amorim, 30% since. I think that what that's telling you is the places and positions where Sesko's getting the ball in this particular team. Obviously, confidence too, but I think that if you look at the likes of Kabi Mainu's stats and what have you, forward passes in the final third, these are things that weren't happening under Amorim. I think now United are getting Sesko the ball in key areas. I think he came back from the injury. Shaun is a better player, the one that he got at Spurs. And I think that this is where the biggest fundamental difference is that Michael Carrick is making sure Sesko gets the ball in key areas. And look, his attitude. We saw he had every right to expect to start against Everton. And I look at someone like Alejandro Garnacho. Kid must have significant regrets over the way he handled his career, way he's handled his exit. And Sesko doesn't have a brother on social media putting stuff out. Sesko doesn't have, people showing up with free Sesko. I'm not Kabi Mainu here, but these things matter. Has the right attitude, comes off the bench, scores a very, very important goal. I think about this every week. I am so glad United did not get Gyökeres.
Is that solely because you're looking at?
I just think he's a better player. I think one, he's younger. I think that it's easy to label Sesko when you first see him as a big target man, but all his goals are with his feet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there are different types of goals. I mean, I think that goal against West Ham was so underrated. I think
that's one of the best goals I've seen in a long, long time.
Anyone that's played football will know how difficult that skill is. Every time I watch it, I'm like, if you don't play football, that doesn't look that difficult or that spectacular. But to control a finish coming across your body like that and to put it in a one place where who's the West Ham keeper isn't getting it, I think that that is just. And at that moment, like, this is the thing, he's scoring key goals that make their key contributions. They're not the fifth goal in a 5-0 win. These are massively important goals. And you have to say that the way Michael Carrick has handled them is, it really is impressive.
Hugely impressive. And he scored 3 goals in the last 5 appearances. And that was the real telling goals against Fulham, against West Ham, and then the last day. You're mentioning the goal against West Ham. Did you hear Ali McCoy speaking about it?
I did.
Oh, that tells you what you need to know. Just
McCoy was a figure, so he knows.
He knows exactly. And the second that it left his foot, Ali was nearly falling off the chair speaking about it. It was just perfect. But I do think that he is benefiting from the fact that he can be removed out of that cauldron. And poor Rasmus did not get that. I'm not saying that it's like for like. I'm just saying that you have 2 incredibly talented young players who have all of the potential. It's something that we spoke about previously on, I think it was only a couple of weeks ago we were saying it. These players come to Old Trafford, they have something about them 99.99% of the time if they've arrived. There's a couple get through like Bebe, but the majority of the players that arrive at Old Trafford have got something about them. So
Manucho.
they have the ability, they have the technique. It's just an awful lot of the time, it's just getting it right up here. And it's finding that momentum and confidence can build into self-belief. And another person that we have to speak about, because we're speaking about a 22-year-old in Sesko, speak about a 23-year-old in Senna Lamans.
Oh,
And
man.
I know the biggest fulcrum of the talking point of the game, it lies into those corners. And I know that someone has actually submitted a question about that we're going to get to shortly regarding the whole officiating. But when you consider at 23 years of age, with I believe 22 or 23 appearances for the football club, and he's having to deal with the likes of James Tarkowski and having to marshal that, I think it is probably one of the most impressive goalkeeping
Oh,
displays
man.
I've seen at Manchester United in a very long time.
You talk about a kid. I'm so envious of that psychological profile, by the way.
Mm.
I wish I could be that composed. I wish I could be that I mean, this is one of the most impressive things about this young lad. This is his second season in professional football,
Yeah.
right? And the way he's handled that pressure, that stress, goalkeeper's not like any other position. So much of it is mental. If you think about the stress, the pressure, the expectation, what he's coming in to replace. United fans are traumatized by that position. His young kid comes in from Belgium, and he looks like Thomas Muller with gloves on, right? And he is just, he can rock me to sleep, right? Normally, when United are holding on to a lead, because PTSD from the past, they're going to concede. Something's going to happen. And to be fair to Onana and Bayern, there, this is, if you go through world football, it's not exactly the Oliver Kahn era, the Peter Schmeichel era. There's you look at Arsenal, whenever Raya's dropping the ball against Wolves, and every single week there's just goalkeeping calamity after calamity after calamity. And this kid comes in like a seasoned veteran, and you're going, this is the type of person you have to do your taxes. This is the type of person, catch a sparrow out of an nest. He's just a breath of fresh air and so wonderfully appealing, and I won't say boring, but, just a guy that doesn't seek the limelight, a guy that doesn't try to overcomplicate things. He doesn't try to be a sweeper. He just is so, I feel I don't want to curse him. There's an amazing interview, if you haven't seen it, that Talk of the Devils does with Eric Steele last week, talking about how important this is, about preparing young goalkeepers for the Premier League and the physical aspect of it. And I think that the way he's adapted, I know we shouldn't do this, but it makes me angry that it wasn't saying before.
Yeah, I know.
Remember, Amorim wanted Emi Martinez. I'm so glad that United did not agree to that deal, because that would have been, Martinez was on free, I think, wasn't he? So it would have been tempting to do that deal and not bring in Lamans. They bring in Lamans, and now you have a goalkeeper for the next 10 years.
And you see, the biggest thing, don't get me wrong, no, I like Emi Martinez, and I think he would have landed, and he wouldn't have been overawed by the.
Would you have wanted him in that game against Everton? Because to me, he's not. Lamans says, his physical stature. I wouldn't trust Emi Martinez on those corners.
I reckon Emi Martinez is sent off after about an hour of that game. I think if Tarkowski or someone is pushing into him or trying to get on top of him the way he was, Martinez is not going to respond.
I want him in a penalty shootout. I want Emi Martinez in a penalty shootout.
Oh yeah. But you see, like, as well, the salary demands and everything that would have come on top of that. But the biggest problem that we would have had, I think, if we had gone down that road, like, Lamans would have ended up going to someone like Aston Villa. And then you're trying to approach them in 3 or 4 seasons. And how much are you forking out to try to bring him to Old Trafford, So this is the huge thing. And this is something that I'm beating a drum about constantly. Lamans, Patrick Dorgu, Aidan Heaven, all of these young players that are coming, Benjamin Sesko, they're all coming to the football club and they're meeting a profile. That's the main thing. We can beat an awful lot of things that happens at this football club. And there's plenty of the beat. There's plenty of that hierarchy you're getting wrong on a regular basis. But the way that the sporting department are
Mm.
developing their youth profile, even going down to Cheetah Obi and the likes of those guys that are coming
For
through,
sure.
like there's something very, very special happening here. And a lot of people are sleeping on it. I do believe that they are, because 21, 22, 23 year olds, on top of the young guys that we're developing like Kobe Manu, there's something very special happening here. But
Shaun, JJ
yeah, go on.
Gabriel on the
Oh,
fringes.
wow.
I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
you see this kid where you're going, good luck trying to keep a lid on that type, because
Oh, my God. He's so
it's
good.
utterly impossible. And I think that we'll see him in a first team United shirt next season.
Well, I think it's necessary, and I hope somehow the physicality is not going to be an issue. I hope it's one of those things that if you're
Yeah.
technically good enough, then you'll
Mhm.
be able to play. Because if he doesn't get that first team football, other senior teams
Yeah,
in the continent are
we are.
going to offer that first team football. They're going to turn his head, and we're not going to be able to come back from that. So we have a situation where we have a guy who's probably going to be able to build some muscle. Yeah. He's going to be able to get a little bit big, but by frame and by nature, he's not going to be an overwhelming player. He's going to do the talking with his feet, though. And we need to trust him, and we need to really embrace youth courage and success here and see what he's actually capable of.
Think about 15-year-olds in your life, Shaun, right?
Hmm.
They're kids, right?
Yep.
I mean, the idea even of my 18-year-old playing for United and dealing with social media, dealing with the pressure, criticism, it's unthinkable to me. He's an amazing kid, but he's a young kid, and then you're going, okay, well, JJ Gabriel's 15. We know he has the ability. What we don't know, how does he deal with the psychological aspect of it? Comes from a footballing family, as we know. And how do you, and this is a question for nutritionists, for people, strength and conditioning coaches and what have you, how do you put muscle mass on a 15-year-old when they're building, when they're developing? Changing the load on a 15-year-old's body as they start changing from a boy to a man is not a straightforward process. If you look at how many players get injured in that era, Kobe Manu picked up injuries, Shea Lacey picked up injuries, Jim Thwaites picked up injuries. I mean, this is an era, an age where young players pick up a lot of injuries because they're changing. And so I think that it's something that's not as straightforward when you're 20, how to bulk. When you're a kid, it's not as straightforward. But I completely agree with you. Like, if that kid isn't in United's first team next season, United are going to lose him. He's a 15, 16-year-old that is ready for first team football based on ability, but the rest of it, I think this is where who United appoint as manager is really, really important. Who understands that transition, who understands the pressure, who understands United's culture. United are not going to be able to go out and spend hundreds and hundreds of millions. So they're going to have to rely on some of these young players. But I think this is where you want to bring in somebody like if you a Mourinho type manager would be the worst type of manager you want to bring in a situation. You need someone that's willing to work and nurture with those youth team players. Ruben Amorim had, for me, inexcusable contempt towards United's young players. I mean, he singled out Harry Maas, singled out Cheetah Obi, was mockingly condescending to Kobe Manu and stuff. I think that's really important. United don't have someone of that profile.
Yeah, it's a valid point. It is a valid point. And I think, regardless of the individual that they actually install there, there's a critical point and there's a critical juncture, not only with JJ Gabriel, but the likes of Shea Lacey as well, because they're a profile of footballer that is based on technique, flair, and a low center of gravity.
Street footballers, Shaun.
Yeah,
We don't see this anymore, man. They're gone.
it's like Samba.
We just see all these same, homogenous footballers. Now we're seeing the young kids. These young kids are street footballers, and it's so refreshing.
Oh, it's totally refreshing. And it's you're falling into that profile of a young Juan Mata, a young David Silva, guys that can control the game just with what they know, that with their footballing IQ. And there's no point in going around it in circles, but there's going to be a very difficult decision for Manchester United that they need to start incorporating him. And even if that's only a case that they can get him into the squad for games that you would expect with maybe 5-10 minutes of the game left, United have a 2-goal cushion maybe. that you can bring him on and you can give him some senior minutes and just give him that exposure, because you can bet yourself, regardless of how good he is on the football field, when someone like James Tarkowski wants to say hello to him on a football field, he's going to know
Mhm.
about it fairly lively. And there's such a massive difference. This is why when you see the likes of James Scanlon and Jack Morehouse, as we're going to be speaking about, this is why they make the next step to go from the 20s to go to the lower leagues in England, because you can learn everything from the academy. You know, you can learn everything you need to know about technique and the way that the game is supposed to be played. The only way that you can learn about how hard it is to be hit by a grown man is to be put out in the field against a grown man. And
We
that's a big thing.
we still segregate at 15 based on age.
Hmm.
You 15, you 16, you 14. We still believe, youth football, unless you get to a level like United where there's those those segregating factors disappear. But normally we're still segregating at that age because there is a significant difference. It starts to disappear once they reach, maturation around 16, 17. But 15 is still so young. But to me, you're looking at a Lamine Yamal type kid here where
Mhm.
someone is just so exceptional, you just can't keep him out of the team. Now you have to manage all the other stuff with this kid and make sure that you steer him towards Ireland.
And I was actually I was gonna make a reference about Ireland for me and you and for anyone who's listening from Ireland. The biggest example that you can give on this is when someone is going from minor and making the jump up at
Yeah.
inter-county level from minor up to senior. And
Mhm.
they look literally like children going up against fully fledged gladiators. And
Yeah.
that's really what you're dealing with. But moving away from JJ slightly, but keeping on the point of selection and how that's going to be so important. Because I think this is something a lot of people are maybe selectively deciding not to speak about. Everything looks great with Carrick and with Steve Holland whispering in his ear. We've gone 6 games unbeaten, 5 wins, 16 points from 18.
Mhm.
But the only changes that we have seen to the starting 11, Phil, have been brought along by injuries. I mean, Patrick Dorgo got injured, he came out of the side. Lisandro
Yeah.
Martinez got injured, he came out of the
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
So at what point do we look at it and how do you weigh up the variables? On one hand, you have a lack of games to be able to bleed in squad players. But then at the other time, you have a squad that's built for multiple competitions with aspirations of Champions League football next year. How do you keep those players happy if you're not going to introduce them into the starting 11?
I think that United have continuity now in their lineup. You can see that where it very rarely changes. We always talk. One of the worst stupid football cliches that I hate is, "Do you know your best 11?" I think that was relevant in the early 80s, and when you had one sub, two subs. Okay, well now. What game are you talking about? My best 11? You talking, and if I've got such an obvious starting 11 and the rest of the squad aren't good enough to challenge, I got a problem with my squad. I should know my best 8 or 9, but not my best 11. Every week there should be one or two positions that are up for grabs based on form, based on the opposition, because I should be able to bring in equivalent or close to equivalent quality where there's not a significant drop off. Well, this is, I think, what Carrick, he knows his best 13, 14. I think outside of that, Shaun, futures for those players are highly questionable. I don't think Manuel Ugarte will be a Manchester United player next season. And, he's had a couple of cameo appearances under Carrick. I think there's another, what's really interesting to me is the lack of game time for Mazraoui. Since he came back, he's had a poor season because he's been injured and what have you. But I'm surprised that he hasn't been getting more game time. I think there's a number of players on the fringes. Obviously, United know they have to do something about Casemiro. Harry Maguire is going to be a big question mark. Next season, they need those games. They need the European games. They need the League Cup games. They need the FA Cup games for revenue alone. But you're right, because you have a squad, and I think that it's Carrick has been a bit fortunate in the sense that he hasn't had to deal with midweek games, which inevitably would accrue injuries and what have you, and have different results. But Ruben Amorim didn't want to take this job in the middle of the season last year when he first got offered it. Michael Carrick has shown if you want to be successful, implement your own ideas. You can't do it off the back of defeats because you just human beings don't trust your methods. They lose confidence. You don't have to win every game, but you have to win enough games to where you're building the equity with the fans and the players to where they trust your methods. Michael Carrick is going to have let's say he gets the job. Next season is going to be a whole different question. Not can you salvage this season and get us into the top 4? Next season will be, okay, you better start challenging for a title. That's a different question, and it'll be a lot less forgiving. But I don't think it's as much of an issue right now. Sorry, this is a long way around of answering the question in terms of keeping players happy in the moment, because I think that outside of the 13, 14 that usually play, I don't think there's futures for the rest of them.
But you see, you've almost added another string to that question along the way when you've mentioned somebody like Manuel Ugarte, because I'm not going to try to defend his performances. They haven't been good enough for what we've seen. But then you could also add a variable to that he was playing within a disjointed team where there was clearly a lack of harmony happening in the background with what was happening. And when you don't have the lack of cup games, who's to say if United had midweek cup games and you start seeing maybe even 60-minute cameos from Manuel Ugarte, from Joshua Zirkzee, for example, that they start impressing and then they give the manager something to think about at the weekend. That's the big thing, and that's what we're missing here. So while I can totally understand that it's difficult to weigh those scales when you only have one game happening at the weekend, it is also a conundrum and a responsibility for any manager, regardless of it being Michael Carrick or anybody else, that you have a squad of players. Now, I will sort of pull on myself here and contradict ever so slightly in saying they have training during the week to be able to show just how hard they're working. But then at the same time, we hear all the time, especially from Carrick, about how well Benjamin Sesko trains and his commitment, even when they're finished training, to individual betterment. And yet that still only returns cameos off the bench. So I do think it's something that needs to be looked at. I think it's being maybe avoided because of the results and because of the fact that things are going so well. But I wonder how much of a conversation it would be if we were drawing, if Benjamin Sesko hadn't stepped up for 3 goals in the last 5, would it be more of a situation about squad management at that stage?
I think that Sesko shows what happens at United. Big football clubs, opportunities don't come along perfectly. You have to take them when you're given them. I feel in Ugarte, in his defense, he's being brought in games where United are under the cosh, where they're trying to hold on to a lead. It's very difficult to come into a team when you're being, you're not playing a game on the front foot. You're constantly trying to defend. The probability that you're going to make a mistake or not play well is significant. I mean, last season at Everton, he scored the winning goal.
I was just running through that in my head. He was instrumental in that 2-2 draw, wasn't he?
That was he scored equaliser, didn't he? Last season. Yeah. So that was a good goal too. I think he's better than what we've seen, but one of the reasons why Luis Enrique wanted to move Manuel Ugarte on is they didn't feel he was good enough in possession. Obviously, Ruben Amorim knows him exceptionally well from his time at Sporting. And I think if he wasn't going to flourish under Ruben Amorim, it'd be hard for me to see where he does. I think that he's going to move on at the end of the season, which I think is the right thing for his career. I feel for him a bit, because even when he has been given opportunities, been put in games where United are trying to hold on to a lead, or he's going in there with a very limited specific purpose, and it's very difficult to perform that way. But I mean, sure, I just haven't seen enough from him to where I would, if he was to walk out of the football club right now, what do I fear losing from Manuel Ugarte? I can't really point anything out. United have some really promising young players coming through as well. I think when they redo their midfield, especially if they qualify for the Champions League, the revenue will be there to be able to invest properly. It's hard to see where he plays. And he's a decent young player. He's a prime of his career. He should be looking to move on.
Yeah, it's probably one of those where we could see a player go on and flourish quite well on the continent because of a different style of football. It's not as man. Yeah, he's got some like.
I'm looking at Italy going, I'm going to go and sign for a decent Italian team
Mm.
I'm sure someone like Napoli would give you 25, 30 mil for him. Why not?
Yeah, if you can recoup the majority of what you spent, player happy, you offload salary, and then you can start focusing on younger players like say Kukone, for example, or anyone along that particular line. But
With younger Roscoe coming in as well this summer, so it'll be interesting to see how he does. Young Colombian midfielder who has been getting very favourable reviews. Maybe too soon for him, but yeah, I think that it's the right thing to do.
yeah, well, he's another example of what I'm saying about planning for the future. It's future planning and building a squad of young players, and it's shrewd market as well, because if you bring in a young player for a minuscule fee, you develop him for a couple of years, and if it's not going to work out in Manchester, then you can sell him, and you're recouping money and you're making money back in as well, and that's what proper football clubs should be doing. We've
Yeah.
spoken all this time, Phil, right?
Mhm.
And I'm drawn here between, what we'll do, we'll stick right on this because it's relevant, because I've just after bringing up finances and buying and selling what proper clubs should do, and it would be foolish of us not to touch on the fact that we saw reports breaking this morning that Omar Barada feels we're now starting to see the green shoots coming from mass redundancies and the cost cutting measures in the club. What are your takes on what you've seen on that?
I mean, it depends what your paycheck is incentivizes you to have to say. I mean, if Omar Barada is in a position where you stand on an issue, depends on where you're sitting. Omar Barada has to say that. There's obviously, United, of course, need to be profitable. It's not sustainable to be a money burning business. You can't continue to sustain losses. Now, businesses try really hard not to show big profits because that's profits are taxable. So you're not always. Sometimes profit and loss is not always an accurate projection of the performance of a business. But if you look at United's previous financials, and I haven't looked much beyond the headlines, Shaun. I mean, I at this because this is just breaking as we were about to record, but the redundancies. I mean, there's a very real human cost to that, and I bristle a bit whenever I hear someone say I'm profitable, but we cut a bunch of people's work. If you're not connected to those people and you're just looking at this from a transactional perspective, you can celebrate it. United need to be profitable. I understand, but my thoughts are still with the people with the way United went about this, and I just think it could have been done better. But from a business perspective, it's encouraging because United need to be in a position of financial health. They've obviously got enormous debt load, and they've got a huge issue with the owners, but I don't think it's a terrible thing to see that when the football club you support is able to report financial health and profit.
Yeah, you summed it up pretty well. I mean, this is a dangerous topic for me to start speaking about. I always try to pull myself back from it because, as everyone who knows
I'm
me
trying to be
know,
nice.
yeah, I'm a very much a working class socialist. I support working class people. To see people losing their jobs, to see people struggling,
Yeah.
when, as Christy Moore said all those years ago, that the owner says things have never been so bad, but the captains of industry won't let them lose, and it's absolutely correct. Like it was true 30 years ago. It's true today. It's working class people continue to suffer while the wealthy get richer, and when you've got your minority owner coming out and blaming normal individuals for the problems across an entire society, when you're very quick to jump ship and not bother supporting that, it's a dangerous situation.
Yeah,
But at the same time, you're right in what you're saying. Any football club that you're going to support, if it's in the green as opposed to the red, and if it is actually going to benefit the football club and moving forward in terms of bringing in quality footballers, benefiting the squad, benefiting the results, and benefiting the overall infrastructure of everything that is involved from training down to the match day experience for the supporters, then it can only be a good thing. I think.
What I want to say on that, Shaun, just quickly, because what annoys me about this, I mean, we see it here with the World Cup tickets. You're a customer whenever that club or that business has demand that exceeds your allocation. So now we're going to sell it to the highest bidder, but you're a fan when they can't sell them, and they publicize losses and privatize gains. So whenever you're asking people, okay, you've now made 23 million, you were justifying ticket price increases based on the financial necessity. Now you're making money. Are you going to start giving some of that back to the fans in the nature of saying, okay, well, now we're making money. We could bring those ticket prices back down, or we can, we can pass some of those gains on to fans in this particular way, that particular way. The thing is they need you when they're losing money. When they're making money, then you're a customer. And I think that's where, what exactly does that profit translate to? If it just means that it greater dividends, then it doesn't really mean anything.
See, this is why I have people knocking on my door fairly regularly to start considering becoming a local councillor, Phil, because I get quite angry about this sort of stuff, you see, and it really does boil my blood, especially when there's nothing that we can do about it. Our words aren't going to fix anything, and it is a very touchy subject for me, like especially when you're speaking about working class, and then you have got what is supposed to be a best-in-class setup just going willy-nilly, hiring people and firing them and paying multi-million severance packages for compensation that could have taken care of X, Y, and Z that they got rid of because of their small marginal gains. This type of stuff is very dangerous. It is extremely infuriating to read about it. And we must remember that as bad as it all is, when people forget this, it all goes back to the Glazers. Every single bit of it goes back to the Glazers, and we wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't for the financial neglect that had been put on this football club for how long. And it's as simple and as complicated as that.
Yeah, look, James, Shaun, when you run a business where profit is first principle, everything is a casualty to that, every single thing. And that's really important, because when you start a business, you have to say, well, how do you define success? If you ask the Glazers how to define success, you ask Jim Ratcliffe how to define success. Based on what they've said and what they do, you'd have to believe they get two different answers. Glazers would give you an answer that relative to a profit and loss column, and Ratcliffe should give you an answer relative to a win-loss column. Now, those two ideologies are not compatible. They're orthogonal. And you look at this and you're going, okay, well, let me give you an example where this is a problem. Let's say Michael Carrick says to, Jim Ratcliffe for the Glazers, if I can get a £40 million midfielder in January, I can qualify for the Champions League. Now, I'm using these numbers merely for the purpose of an example.
Yeah.
Jim Ratcliffe should say, okay, well, that makes sense. £40 million midfielder getting in the Champions League, that's exactly what the football club needs. Glazers would go, 40 million. We get 20 million for qualifying for the Champions League. That means it'll be a 20 million loss. That's a no. Because for us, we'd say yes if we got 80 million for qualifying for the Champions League, because now there's profit return on that. But if we're giving you 40 million for a midfielder and the financial return in getting into the Champions League is 20 million, then no, because it's a business question. Now, Pep Guardiola goes and asks Manchester City owners for 180 million in January to win the league. Pep Guardiola gets 180 million. So this is what I'm saying. Like, everything is a derivative of your first principle. And if it's profit, then what you get inside a business is you get people competing with each other. You're not competing with Man City. What drives businesses is that, this guy sold 100 grand last month and you only sold 50. I'm competing with the guy next to me now. So, and you have no cohesion, no camaraderie. There is no collective sacrifice towards the goal. Everyone is individualistic. Everyone is working towards their own means, and that's what United have had. And so changing, the culture is not an accident. The culture is a derivative of the priorities of the people that run the business. That's it.
Well, we can only hope that the priorities are what we have been led to believe that they are now, and that's sporting success. And you mentioned the Champions League and the windfall that will come to the club with that. It's best we probably speak about the football at this stage.
But just a quick sorry to interrupt. Perfect example being that Michael Carrick has finally got United playing well, moving in the right direction, and then he has to deal with Jim Ratcliffe doing an interview that is massively contaminates that camaraderie inside the football club. You have reports of Casemiro, which were obvious, by the way, being upset about being singled out by the owner of the football club as bad business. This is exactly what happens when you are not prioritizing sport and culture, atmosphere, when you have this particular obsession with commerce and profit, and everything is permissible. if you're not making money. And I think this is where I have concerns, because Michael Carrick will have had to overcome that. There will be people inside United that won't have liked that. I understand that people listening to this will have views on this across the board. I get that. I'm not. What I'm arguing is, when Manchester United's owners are on TV, they don't need to opine on these other issues. You're there. You should be opining on things that help Michael Carrick in a sporting sense, even if it's bullshit. About the great atmosphere and the camaraderie and the family atmosphere, and not saying divisive things that make that worse. And I just think that's where, I have genuine concerns about the mindset and a theory of mind when it comes to these billionaires who are, by their nature, extremely solipsistic.
Yeah, but they don't live on the same planet as us, Phil.
Of course.
They just, they say whatever they want, and there's no ramifications for it. And this is a guy who's not getting any younger. Call a spade now. He's not getting any younger. Myself and yourself spoke off camera about the perils of what happens when you start hitting those particular ages. And, you're living on a different planet. You're hitting a certain age. You just get accustomed to speaking in a certain way to certain individuals. And then the mask slips when you're in front of a camera. It's not beneficial in any way, shape, or form, Phil, but that's just the world that we live in.
What surprises me about it, Shaun, is the lack of self-awareness to know how divisive that is. You might believe every word he says, but to me, that's something where I'm obviously not going to come out and say that on TV for obvious reasons, because I'm well aware of what the reaction would be. I mean, you're a billionaire. You should be much more precise with your language and stuff like that. Anyway, we talked about this, but
I get it, but you see, it leads in towards the point when there's a certain point where you should just step away from the cameras. I mean, he should have advisors with him that are advising him. There's things that you should and shouldn't be saying. And if I can make a point about Jadon Sancho, for example, that I made previously, not today, obviously, but that he's a prime example of how necessary it is to surround yourself with the correct people off the field. It's the same. It's the same with individuals, regardless of where they are at the football club. Everybody should have proper advisors. There should be an internal group there that is able to prioritize the correct line of communication, whatever you're speaking about at whatever particular time, and that then feeds into the instability that's within the channels within the football club. And this is something. This is why I was hesitant about starting it, because the two of us could speak about this for a very, very long time.
This is true for everyone in life. It matters who your inner circle is, right? It matters who are the influential voices in your life, who are your examples. In some sense, I feel a bit sorry for Jadon Sancho, because these people that surround him are enablers and vultures, and they're manipulators, and they're much better at this than a footballer. And eventually, you see a career trajectory like the one we've seen with Sancho, which is genuinely heartbreaking. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's made bad decisions, but I think that a lot of the decisions that these young lads make, and I've seen it. I know players of certain, that they play at the very, very top of the game, and honestly, Shaun, you think you want that life, mate, but I was talking to one of them, and this is just a quick example of what I'm talking about. And he told me, the first year you get that money, everything's great. You buy the Ferraris, you buy the houses, you buy the jewelry, you buy everything you never had. The human brain habituates everything. Then the second year, ban a Ferraris like ban a Mars bar. You can't ban another house, there's no emotional dividend from that. There's no emotional high anymore. Now your friends are selling stuff to the media about you. Now your family's all fighting because they want money. And now you can't go out anymore because you're being photographed everywhere. You're afraid to, meet a young lady in case, she gets abused. You bang into somebody, you have an assault charge. And now you just become more and more paranoid, more and more reclusive. You bring people over to your house. You have to take their phones. I mean, who the fuck wants to live like that? And so what do? Like any human being, they start indulging in vices. Because when you're miserable, you chase pleasure and not happiness, because happiness is hard. So when you have all this money, now they gamble, now they drink, now they sex, they drugs, all this stuff that to try to have this temporary alleviation of the suffering and then we're sitting there going, well, I shouldn't feel that way because they make $100,000 a week. Like, Paul, you can make £1 million a week. Very soon, your brain will habituate it, and all of the things that aren't transactional, the things that you need to nourish your soul in life, will have nothing. That money will have nothing to do with it. And it's not. They're getting tortured on social media. Everything. It's very difficult to remain focused and consistent. And this is where the football club has to help them. Football club cannot be working with media outlets that are participating in that abuse, which is just beyond belief to me. And it's when you hear it up close, it actually made me embarrassed for some of the abuse I put online, undoubtedly with Maguire and stuff like that, where I'm like, Jesus, you see the real cash value of that, the granular impact on people's lives, and it's like it's heartbreaking.
What do you say? Whether you're a footballer or whether you're an individual drawing welfare, if you surround yourself with people that tell you what you want to hear all the time, then you're never going to be able to grow as a human being, and you are going to make mistakes, and you're going to repeat the same mistakes over and over again.
100%.
And it doesn't matter whether you're poor or whether you're wealthy, that's going to happen over and over again. So when you're speaking about someone like Radcliffe and coming out and making preposterous claims and ludicrous statements, you'd like to think that somebody got him aside and said, okay, maybe think about what you're going to talk about in the future. And you'd like to think that there'll be no repetition of that. But Jadon Sancho was just one example I was given. There's so many of them, and I've met plenty through the years as well, and there's going to be plenty more to come. That's an absolute certainty. But we're here now. We're speaking for close to an hour, and we had promised that we were going to address some questions from some of the listeners that were coming through. I have one in front of me here, and I'm going to ask it to you because this is something that came through, and it is relevant to something we were already speaking about. It was from Clicks_MUFC on Twitter, and they want to know our opinions on the Everton Arsenal tactics from corners and what PGMOL should do about it.
Yeah, it's a really tricky question, Shaun, because I don't know. A lot of times when football officials try to, administrators try to correct a wrong on the field, they don't realize the second and third order effects of that particular rule. And sometimes they're hard to predict. I don't know how you go about preventing that, but I think that for me, referees need to stamp it out early. I think that whenever you see all that jostling going on, I mean, how can we create a rule that gives a goalkeeper more protection? Probably not. I think referees are way too tolerant. When you've got 6-7 players surrounding a goalkeeper and there's contact everywhere, almost nothing gets given. But then we see, was it the Arsenal game where there's just a Colomani just slightly touches Gabriel. That type of physical contact is happening every 5 seconds on one of these corners, and it's an immediate, obvious free kick. But for some reason, I think that it's a lot of times you have to favor the team defending in that position because
I spoke about that exact thing yesterday, right? And it's the thing that really stands to me the most. You have a situation in that North London derby. Arsenal are winning 2-1. Spurs score. It's disallowed over a nothing touch on the back of Gabriel. Yet if the roles are reversed, they're not given a penalty for that, Phil. And yes, it goes about favouring the defensive team, or it goes about favouring the defensive team, but there's no logic in that. And another thing that I've spoken about with this is somebody within the organisation will make the argument that it's like swings and roundabouts with these decisions. And even though that went against Spurs will likely benefit from something in a week or 2 weeks' time. But that shouldn't be the case. There should be continuity across the board.
I think it's with rules, you can bend them, not break them. If we were to officiate the game based on the hard application of the letter of the law, the game would be stopped every 2 seconds because a referee has to have a subjective determination on what is acceptable physical contact and what isn't, right? Okay, that's within, the realms of acceptability. So I feel for them a little bit on that, but whenever you have something that if Liverpool scored, I think it was against Fulham, if I'm correct, I retweeted it, where exactly the same thing happened, and it was allowed to stand. Referees cannot look at those two videos and come to two different determinations. Either both of them are legal or both of them aren't.
Yeah,
that's not a complicated decision. And where we see variance, another thing, Shaun, like where I do sympathise a bit with them. We saw the FA Cup without VAR, and the decision, the officiating was horrendous because we have now become lazy with technology in our own lives, where we're becoming less aware. We're relying on technology. I try to drive a car that doesn't have reverse cameras in it. I tried to do it a while ago and nearly reversed into someone because I was waiting on the alarm coming on. What that's doing to us as a species, the dumbing down of society, because we're now I used to be able to know how to get to places. Now I'm so reliant on my GPS, I forget. And I think there's a very real consequence of relying too much on technology that makes referees become over reliant on it. Well, you and I would be the same way. I just don't know what the right answer is. It's really, really hard.
Well, like, inconsistency is the biggest thing. And, so many people point at VAR and say VAR is the problem. When you're just speaking about that, VAR isn't the problem. It's the people that are using VAR is the problem. And when I looked at that incident with Arsenal and Spurs, for example, the very first thing I came to my head, I don't know if you remember this, it was the seconds before Harry Maguire headed the winner against Lyon in the Europa League. Because Harry Maguire had his hands, I don't know the name of the Lyon defender, but he had his hands on his back, and he gave as much of a touch on his back as happened in that North London derby. So it ties into what you're saying. There should be one letter to the law that what's allowed and what's not allowed, because it's killing the game. And when you're focusing specifically on what the person asked in that question, I don't care if it's within the law. That is not football. What we're witnessing, what Arsenal are doing, what Everton did against Manchester United, that is not football, Phil. That is reminiscent of what we're seeing with the Six Nations at the moment.
No, and look, with VAR, Shaun, this is to me is a really fundamental misunderstanding of how the human brain works. We don't question technology on objective decisions. Was the ball over the line or was it not? No one wants to see goal line technology taken away. But in an effort to remove jeopardy, you remove the spontaneous joy. So now, referee is told, go look at a screen, which is already suggestive, right? And already a referee is now thinking, I've got a decision wrong. They're going and looking at something. You're breaking this game down into fractals. And you give a human being 3 minutes to make a decision on something. Now they're considering, what did I give last week? What's my relationship like with this manager? How consequential is it? All these things. How's the media going to react? And then they make the decision. Now you and I and everyone else would do exactly the same thing, right? That's why you're getting wild inconsistency, because they're not just adjudicating the decision at that point. Now they're adjudicating the whole event and the subsequent consequences. And am I going to get destroyed on Sky? Well, you know what? Last week I didn't give this. Now I don't want to give. And now you get massive inconsistency.
But you're not wrong. But then when you'll see these decisions given where a goal is disallowed because a player who's offside is impeding the vision of a goalkeeper. Yeah. Was Senna Laman's vision not impeded by any one of the dozen players that were jumping alongside him and stuck alongside him so as he couldn't move the last day? Surely that has to fall into some sort of common sense, though.
Yeah, but this is the thing, is that it's really, for you and me, yes, but I sympathize with referees, because in that situation, the human brain, if you just left it to making split-second decisions, the ratio of right from wrong, they were getting maybe 80% of them right. That was quite reasonable. You're never going to remove human error from it. And when you're looking at something by fractals, there are so many things that you're not considering. Momentum, you're not considering, you look at that slight touch on Gabriel on a camera, it looks terrible. In real time, it looks like it's just almost virtually no contact at all. I don't think you can do that. I think that this is there's a certain aspect of this that you can't break down into like American football, where stop, adjudicate, because now we're getting goals by court order, and I'm willing to accept that some of these will be wrong. Okay, in exchange for a game that has spontaneous joy, not a game where I feel like it's paint by numbers.
And unfortunately, we are not going to solve this on this particular conversation. As I say to everybody that I get embroiled in a chat with about this, but I certainly share everyone's frustration on
Mm.
it. That's a certainty, regardless of whether or not I work in the industry. It breaks my heart to see this. It really does, because especially at a time when the rugby is on, as you know, it's just reminiscent of what we're seeing. It's Andy
Mm.
Farrell style tactics.
Yeah.
You have any questions on your side that you want to get to?
Nope, I don't have them. I did have some where we were talking about Jack Moorhouse and James Scanlon. My apologies. I don't have it pulled up on my phone. Let me pull it up really quick, because I appreciate those who do get in touch with us, and appreciate all of those who download the podcast. Jason Anderson asked his question, saying, question for myself and you. Do you have any info on the club's thoughts on academy talents like Jack Moorhouse, James Scanlon?
Oh yeah. Well, I
Moorhouse
roll.
on the bench, by the way, against Everton. Just came back from Leighton Orient, made the bench, which was good to see. Go ahead.
Absolutely it was, because what that shows right off the offset is that he's betting on himself. He went to Leighton Orient, didn't necessarily have the greatest time in the world there. He was struggling to get minutes. And look, that happens. It's not the first player who's gone on loan to a lower down team and has struggled, because this boils back on what I said earlier on when we were talking about JJ. The difference when you're going from the under-20s game to the senior is huge. The level of physicality and the differences that are there is absolutely huge. And you can have a very good, fast, technical footballer, but when you get hit by a grown man, and especially some of the guys in the lower divisions they're in their early to mid 30s, and they've been doing it for so long, and they know all the secrets of the dark arts. It can do an awful lot to a young guy's confidence when he goes out onto the field. But when you're talking about what the club actually think internally about these people, I speak to people about them all the time, especially James Scanlon. I wrote about him very recently. It's an anomaly in itself that such a young guy before leaving the club was a full international with Gibraltar. And he's thought about very, very highly, because what he has done, particularly in the last 12 months, he's come on leaps and bounds where he's got to that point where it almost looks like he's on a level above the people at his age in the academy. And I'm not putting him at the same level as Paul Pogba when I say this, but we saw when Pogba was in the academy, he hit a certain point where it was almost like he was a man playing against children.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that James Scanlon is there yet, but Scanlon certainly looks a peg above an awful lot of the players at the academy level. And we were seeing this with his output, because his goals and assists were absolutely great. He now has gone to Swindon, and he's gone with all of the hope in the world that the physicality of that particular division and the men's game is going to benefit him, because he's already experienced this with Gibraltar. And this is the big thing. This is something he has that Jack doesn't have. Obviously, Jack benefits myself and yourself, because he's an under 21 international with Ireland, and he looks very, very strong. And I know a lot of people in the FAI. I've done a lot of work with people in the FAI, and this is an individual that they're very interested to be able to get up, because they know the talent that he has there. United look at these players, and some people think when a player goes away from the club on loan that they're not going to make it at the football club, because everybody automatically thinks that you have to be a Kobbie Mainoo, that you have to come directly out of the academy and into the first team to make it at Manchester United. And yet so many people forget David Beckham didn't do that. David Beckham went on loan, came back to the club, didn't have the mightiest time on loan, came back to the club and learned, and he bet on himself. So when you see Moorhouse on the bench going up against Everton, that is a huge testament to his self-belief, because he's gone to a football club, Phil, where he has struggled to get minutes, and he's come back to Manchester United, and the workload and the output that he's putting on the bench or in training is earning him a place on the bench against Everton. And that is the greatest testament that the club will show, that, especially what Michael Carrick they were referencing, that they believe in these players and they want to give them the opportunity. So I think somebody like Moorhouse, it's a matter of time before he makes his debut. And Scanlon has all the opportunities in the world from Swindon. He is thought about very, very highly, and there's great hope that he can benefit massively at Swindon.
If you remember, Shaun, Pep Guardiola a couple of weeks ago was talking about one of the biggest problems for the development of talent in England. The talent is there. He goes, what is the issue is they're playing in front of 10 people, right? And what he's obviously talking about is these young players need an intermediate level between the youth team and a level where they're playing in front of 20,000 people, where there's real pressure. Where Segunda B in the La Liga and stuff, they've got Barcelona B teams and stuff that are playing against teams like Deportivo La Coruña and stuff, that where there's 20,000 people, 30,000 people, real life pressure in front of fans, where results matter. That is something that you can't, you can't fabricate it. That real life pressure and dealing with fans and all that. I think that is such an important aspect of that development, and
Absolutely.
it's something that you can produce at youth level. So occasionally, when you need to get playing an FA Youth Cup final or something, and there's 30,000 people, 40,000 people. I think that's what it was when they played Forest. That is obviously something that's extremely valuable, but it's really important. So that those loans are massive.
Massive, as well as that competition where you see you've selected Premier League clubs and the youngsters going out playing against the lower down teams. That's massively beneficial as well, because you're dead right to mention that. It's something that I've escaped by because I'm just speaking about the physicality, but also the mental side of it, and having an excess amount of leery individuals screaming and roaring at you in the crowd. I mean, that's not the easiest thing to come to terms with when you're a young lad as well. But yeah, in response to the question, both players thought about very, very highly, as well as many, many more. And it's just about making the jump, isn't it?
I mean, you have the Fletcher twins, young Thwaites. There's just there's just so many very good. Biancarri, Chidobe. There's just so many talented young players.
Jaden Camison is another one. Jaden Camison is thought about very, very highly as well. There's lots of these guys, super talented players, and it can only bode very well for the football club that we have such a wealth of talent coming through. You remember, it's not so long ago that a lot of these guys won the treble with the under-18s.
Yeah.
So there's great talent there. And like we spoke about at the start, when you can start a podcast speaking about 3 points and the benefits that go with that, it's nice to end the podcast speaking about the crop of young lads that we have coming through that maybe we can be speaking about in 5, 6, 7 years' time here as well, my man.
I hope so, my friend. I hope so. If we're living inspired 5, 6 years time, it was still based on the way the world's going right now. I don't know.
Oh God, let's not go that far. But look, man, that was an absolute treat again speaking with you. It's fantastic. Third chat that we've had here. And I know Phil is going to say this, so I'll say it to everybody listening now as well. Any bit of feedback that we can get, that's all we're looking for, because this isn't just something that we're looking to do as a flash in the pan. The two of us know each other a long time. We're in the industry an awful long time. We know a lot of people around. So it's not only just the insight that we can give to the football club, but it's two passionate football fans. Yeah. And we want to share the journey with all you guys. So if there's anything you'd like us to speak about, if there's anything you don't want us to speak about, just let us know. We're happy to take it all on board.
To me, it's still one of the biggest privileges I can ever imagine, that someone gives me an hour or two of their time a week, that they listen to me or listen to us talking. I mean, that's just something that I've never take for granted. I'm incredibly grateful for all the follows, likes, retweets, and support. There's so many messages I don't get back to that I sincerely apologize, because it does come across as being rude. It's just a question of time. I appreciate sincerely everyone's support. Thanks for following at We Are United Pod, and of course my colleague Shaun here at Theatre of Red at his own personal account. It's very, very much appreciated. The feedback's been amazing. We're going to continue to do this and make sure there's a significant aspect of this dedicated to questions each week.
Absolutely, and we look forward to each and every one of them. So take care all. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, folks, all the best. Cheers, Shaun. See you, man.
See you.
Cheers.